The Honourable Nicole Overall.
Thank you, Madam Assistant President. I rise to make a contribution to this debate, and I begin by again expressing my deepest sympathies and condolences to our Jewish communities following the unspeakable events of December 14. In doing so, I separate that from this debate today, which, while purporting to be about what happened at Bondi, is already a conflation of too many unrelated elements. Today, it's not about merely critiquing a bill. It's exposing it as an illusion. Labor working overtime to dress up an immature and ill-conceived attempt at policy by claiming it's to deal with public safety. But look closely, in literally the 5 minutes we've had to do so, and what do we see? Nothing of genuine substance. This bill, and the Premier for that matter, akin to the emperor with no clothes, a spectacle engineered to impress but devoid of anything truly meaningful. Of course, the horror of December 14 at Bondi demands a serious response. It should be a response that's crafted, scrutinised and debated in a rigorous and effective way. But that's not what's happening here. What's required is legislation capable of addressing the actual risk that's been exposed, not something playing at looking decisive, but avoiding the underlying crux of the matter. Rather than focusing on the real and, quite frankly, terrifying issue of anti-Semitism, a hatred of Jews that's not just about faith, but Jews as a people, exacerbated particularly since the atrocities of October 7, 2023, as well as homegrown terrorism. Instead, what Labor has created is a Frankenstein monster of a bill. Even being described as omnibus, that's Labor admitting it's about jamming as many things in as possible, inevitably diluting the effectiveness and ramping up the potential risks and unintended consequences. That it lumps together measures with no practical corresponding connection is nonsensical. Going from dealing with protest to terrorism symbols and firearms regulations thrown in as well. 3 distinct policy areas engaging different legal principles, operational realities and affected communities. Each component demands separate scrutiny. Each raises different questions of proportionality, necessity and effectiveness. By enmeshing them, the government is only compressing the debate, blurring purpose and making it harder for us to assess, let alone make reasoned decisions. Complex, multifaceted matters that deserve more than just knee-jerk, media-seeking responses. The other aspect about it being omnibus is in relation to the now apparent need, after the horse has well and truly bolted, for it all to be addressed quickly. Given what's being proposed and why, it most certainly shouldn't be about saving time. We should be making sure time is used to maximum advantage to deliver the best possible policy and outcomes, not lame duck legislation that fails to properly launch and definitely fails to land. Labor claims, again today, in relation to the equally lame attempt at justification on the hard adjournment disappearing as definitively as this government's ability to deliver on its election commitments, that this matter is apparently urgent. And yet the Police Minister has admitted that there isn't even a proposed timeline for implementation. The only thing urgent is the way in which it's been developed, introduced within days of the Bondi attack, with mere hours for consideration and scrutiny by the opposition and no meaningful consultation with those most directly affected. As we've heard, stakeholder organisations representing firearms users, including New South Wales farmers, have stated publicly that they sought and offered engagement but were essentially ignored. Lower house MPs from regional and rural electorates have echoed the same concern. Why wouldn't Labor want this looked at fully, with proper engagement and scrutiny to ensure we get it right? There might be a few probable reasons. Perhaps it's to avoid any embarrassments as to the failings that have occurred on this government's watch, from protests that cross the line to the unfettered rise of anti-Semitism that too many have tried to sideline and dismiss? Or is it an inability by Labor to fully understand the complex matters we're being presented with? Might it perhaps even be what seems to be the irresistible urge of the Premier to get himself another front page? Perhaps the incredibly poor way this has been handled has aspects of all of that. What it says is that this government isn't serious about the things that it claims that it was elected on: consultation, transparency and oversight. Instead, it's more like it's whatever gets the Premier a headline. And given the circumstances, that is unconscionable. Good public safety legislation is informed by evidence, operational advice and stakeholder input. That process hasn't occurred here, and the defects in the firearms provisions bear that out most conspicuously. As drafted and as pointed out by many others, nothing in these provisions would have altered the events of December 14. Whether those perpetrators had access to 6 guns or 4, as is being put forward, the tragic outcome would have been the same. And what of the other methods they could have employed to create chaos and carnage? The bombs they had prepared? What's being done about bomb prevention and regulation? Let alone crickets when it comes to the illegal market and even 3D printed weapons. What might have changed the situation, and even then it's a big might, was if the existing rules that are already in place were employed the way they should have been. The number of firearms held by licensed, law-abiding citizens was not a causal factor. The issue was a failure to identify and respond to escalating ideological risk. If existing firearms framework is already not being effectively enforced, layering additional caps and requirements on top of it doesn't fix the problem. It simply adds administrative burden while diverting attention from the real failures. That concern has been raised repeatedly by New South Wales farmers and others who rely on firearms for occupational purposes, yet it's all been conveniently ignored. When it comes to the firearms caps proposed, they appeared to have been plucked out of thin air, selected with no transparent justification. No evidence has been provided to explain why these numerical thresholds were chosen, how they correlate to risk, and we know that they weren't informed by consultation with those who actually do know about such things. It seems they've all been based on the Premier, to quote Mr Borzak earlier, out-Rogering Roger, that is, Roger Cook in Western Australia. The New South Wales Premier boasting about what's being proposed as the toughest laws in the country. Never mind, we have some of the strictest laws in the world already. But his whole argument underpinning that claim? Having 1 gun less than what they have in WA. Yes, that'll certainly fix the real problem. Then there were the made-up or ill-defined concepts as well, also raised by the Honourable Rod Roberts earlier. References to some mysterious things described as belt-fed magazines, an unidentifiable object that left almost everyone with actual knowledge asking if the government has any clue what it's talking about, let alone trying to regulate. Equally troubling is the treatment of personal information relating to firearms. Already there's serious concerns about the security and confidentiality of firearm owners' data, and it seems sensitive, confidential information has been made public. Public safety isn't helped by broadcasting who owns what and where. Along with being illegal, it's plain reckless. And what of any detail on how this will work when it comes to operational capacity and what will inevitably require additional resourcing and funding? If enforcement challenges already stem from staffing, deployment and intelligence capability constraints, then expanding statutory powers without addressing this just makes the situation even worse. As one example, during budget estimates in September, there were no clear answers provided as to whether counter-terrorism and public order policing units are adequately staffed or funded, particularly in light of sustained protest activity and escalating demands on police resources. Ultimately, As Jewish community leader Alex Rivchin has publicly stated, this was not a gun crime. This was an anti-Semitic hate crime, one driven by extremist Islamic ideology. Addressing that threat requires early intervention, enhancing intelligence capability, better protection of targeted communities, and most importantly, a clear legal framework for confronting extremist ideology. This bill doesn't comprehensively address any of these issues. A measured response requires legislation that addresses causes, not just symptoms, that deals with the weaponiser, not the weapon. A saying people in regional areas know very well: it's a pretty useless handyman that blames the tools. An adequate measured response also requires Parliament being given sufficient time and adequate information to do our job properly. Our role is to legislate with clarity, not be clouded by illusion. And given the incredible gravity of what we're attempting to deal with in these circumstances, we should be doing all possible to make sure that it is as right as it can be. In a time such as this, one of statewide and national grief, we must be responsible legislators. We should not become the weaponisers, not allow fear and tragedy to be used for political advantage. We must also not allow law-abiding citizens, in this instance those who own firearms, to be made the scapegoats. Sadly, disappointingly, what we're seeing here does seem to be little more than political posturing, pandering populism and poor governance, and it needs to be called out. All of this is for Labor to answer to and for. No proper engagement or consultation. All the talk of bipartisanship, but the opposition receives the, quite frankly, poorly drafted bill literally 5 minutes before midnight. And Labor isn't willing to listen to real concerns or how it might be improved and made more effective. Instead, the choice they offer is essentially binary: support everything or nothing. It's preposterous. For the sake of everyone, it should be about doing the right thing and doing this right. Instead, it's using this terrible situation we've been confronted with for just more political manoeuvring. Manoeuvring that, at its core, seems more concerned with deflection, distraction, and trying to wedge law-abiding citizens to make it look like they don't care. It's peak Labor. All politics, no governance. Let this House then, let the people, our communities, see it. See the Premier and this government clearly for what it truly is: an illusion. The old wizard revealed behind the curtain as the one pulling the strings to mislead and misguide. Or perhaps an even more accurate metaphor, the Emperor Bear without a shred of substance. To conclude, I reference 2 points. The first was that made by the Honourable Rod Roberts earlier this afternoon. Just as those 2 monsters at Bondi do not represent or reflect all people of the Muslim faith, nor do they represent or reflect hundreds of thousands of respectful, responsible firearms owners. And I'll quote the President of the New South Wales Farmers, Mr. Xavier Martin. In being asked by the ABC about this situation compared to the response to Port Arthur, in his words, "It's unbelievably unprofessional this time, just extraordinary. When I look back on when John Howard and Tim Fisher engaged, I'd have to give them 9.8, 9.9 out of 10. And unfortunately, Minns and Albanese wouldn't even rank 2 out of 10. It's just pathetic." End quote. Point made, loud and clear. This bill, apparently according to Labor, what's going to save us all, is not the solution. And I am incredibly concerned for New South Wales if this government thinks that it is.
Thank you.